Guys, it's the Inspirational Power Hour. And listen, it always does my heart good for us to be able to have crucial and necessary conversations, especially those that affect our community. Today, I'm incredibly excited to talk to Lisa Butler. She is a trained and licensed clinical social worker. Is that right? Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, one thing that I did not know, and we've already kind of gotten into this a little bit, July is observed as, this is the acronym BIPOC, Black
Hmm.
and Indigenous People of Color Mental Health Awareness Month. Now,
Hmm.
we know May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but I think this month probably hones in on issues that affect our community. A very necessary conversation because there are some things that we deal with that are specific to us, and I don't want to jump all the way into it, but Miss Lisa, first of all, thank you for hanging out with us today and for talking about this crucial subject.
This is one of my favorite things to do. Thanks so much for having me, Chandra. I appreciate being here.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah,
before we dive right into it, can you give us a little background on yourself and how you got into this work?
sure. I live in Chicago. I am a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in the Chicagoland area. I have been working with African American girls and women for 20 plus years
Mm,
around issues of anxiety, depression, um, trauma, mother daughter conflict, and all sorts of other things. One of the things that I know for sure is that at 16, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be someone to help people cultivate the lives of their dreams through healthier emotional, mental, and spiritual space. And so I feel blessed and honored to be able to do that, and specifically as it relates to African American girls and women's emotional, mental, and spiritual health.
yeah, yeah. And there's
Mhm.
a lot to unpack in that subject matter, and so with you mentioning specifically those issues that deal with women and girls, kind of talk to us a little bit about why working in that space is near and dear to your heart.
Well, it's near and dear to me because I am a Black woman. I
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
Black girl.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly I understand, our stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
At a certain level, because I am occupy both of those
Mm-hmm.
things, spaces. Um, for me, I think my love for this work is really embedded in um, helping Black girls and Black women understand that how important their emotional space is and how crucial healing that space and processing the things that happen to us is. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we think, and I grew up in church, never heard of a therapist before when I was, growing up. What is that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But take it to Jesus, forget about it. All those things, pray about it, forget
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
And although I am a big believer in prayer and love Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
I know that you can have Jesus and still have a space to process and heal from pain. And so
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to cultivate a space for Black girls and Black women to get to have this safe space, right? To process their issues, talk, and cultivate tools, right, that will help them mitigate feelings of anxiety, of depression, and stress and trauma, because there's a lot of that. But I also want to say this too. I think it's important to point out that we didn't just, how sometimes people say, "Oh, you look like your mama or you look like your grandma." We didn't just inherit the way they look, right? We inherited historical and racial trauma as well from these foremothers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes, and their interpersonal traumas too. So then sometimes we have our own stuff that happens, and then we're dealing with their stuff too because of what has happened to us in this country. And so for me, it's really important to be in a space where I can help people to think about that,
Mm-hmm.
process that, and not feel like they're crazy, but ultimately
Yeah.
be able to cultivate the lives of their dreams. Mhm.
It's so amazing that you said this. I was having a conversation with a friend not too long ago, and I was just sharing with you that I'm in Jackson, Mississippi. And
Mhm. Mhm.
Mississippi, has its own history, and still today there
Mhm.
are a lot of things that we are still working through that exist right here in our
Mhm.
state, right? And
Mhm.
so I was
Mhm.
sharing with my best friend the other weekend that I had a godmother, and she was considerably older, right? Considerably
Mhm.
older, but she was a
Mhm.
strong presence in my life. I spent a lot of time with her. And when she passed away, she was in her 90s. And one of the things that I remember that we were never allowed to whistle. Like she would always say, "Don't whistle." We just were not allowed to whistle. And sometimes just as a kid, you run around, you whistle, and she would just like, "No, stop whistling." So she passed several years ago, and a cousin of mine, we were talking, and I just kind of brought it up in a joke, but she mentioned something. She said, "You got to remember, she lived through Emmett Till." So she was like, so in her mind,
Yes.
whistling is
Yes.
associated with something.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
she was just kind of like, black, girl, boys, ain't nobody whistling around here, just don't whistle. And
Yeah.
there's so much, I think, possibly so much of so many of the things that we do still in our families today, we probably don't even know why or
Why?
understand why, where it comes from.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So many things that my grandmother would say to me growing up. Now I think about it and I'm like, whoa, that's why she said that, or that's why she did that. But your godmother's, ooh, that's powerful. Whistling for her was traumatic. It represented trauma and death and a loss of life for being Black. So that
And
is
you
some powerful stuff. And
and
then,
you being
you
from
know,
Chicago, you know
yes,
that.
yes, oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We were just talking about before we came on what's happening in Chicago right now, and it is yesterday. I just was in the car talking to my mom about it, and just busted out into tears because I was driving and with her someplace and safe in a car in a neighborhood where nobody's shooting, and it just occurred to me that so many of our young people don't have that,
Mm.
that they can't do it. There's no place that they can go that's safe for them. So they're forced to be in spaces where at any moment
Mm.
something can happen to you or people that you love. And it just overwhelms me to think about first my privilege, but then um, they're not having that privilege
Yeah.
because they're Black. You know what I mean? And so
Absolutely.
it is something in Chicago. 100 people shot this weekend, and they're shooting 1 month old babies in Chicago. So it doesn't even matter how old you are at this point. Mhm.
So for over 400 years of this systematic,
Mhm.
history of specifically our people, and the way it's still woven into the fabric of America today
Mhm.
and its systems, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Over the last year plus, the pandemic, we saw that play out in so many ways. I remember early in the pandemic, a mental health specialist I heard on television said, we're yet to see all of the effects of how this, will affect us mentally and emotionally, this
Mhm.
pandemic. What are some of the things you're seeing now on this side of the pandemic, specifically with our people in terms of mental health and disparities and things? What are some of the things, issues you're seeing?
I see a lot of grief, a lot of grieving, because so many people in our community they were lost
Mm-hmm.
to COVID. I see a lot of anxiety even now about being out.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's opened back up, but what does that mean, right? And some folks are not yet convinced about the vaccination, and
Mm-hmm.
so anxiety about that and the pressure of that being pushed on us.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see people just stressed out and worried about what life will look like moving forward. What happens now, right? Like, what else is
Mm-hmm.
going to pop up? We've had
Mm-hmm.
so much stuff happen to us. I always say Black folks are so paranoid. We be like looking around the corner. What else is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because things have happened, right? Loss of work, loss of opportunities, and things like that have caused people to have a lot of stress. Anxiety probably would be my number one thing with my clients now. Worried about um, being back out, what that looks like, and also kind of what the future holds.
Mm-hmm.
This pandemic really shook everything, and brought to the surface a lot of things that infrastructure holds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people are, concerned about what the future holds at this point. And even if you get the vaccination, what does that mean? Can I
Yeah.
just be out? All those things.
You
So,
get overwhelmed with making sure you're making the right decision, because it's not
yes.
even about just you. It's
Mm-hmm.
about the people around you, and
Mm-hmm.
everything else, your family, your
Yep.
friends, making sure you're making the right decision for yourself and others.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that I was talking to someone about the other day was, there was a lot of talk about how Black people disproportionately, had COVID. And I think that that's, we always disproportionate in something,
Mm-hmm.
right? Disproportionate in gun deaths in Chicago, for instance, disproportionate in so many other ways. It starts to have an impact on how we feel about ourselves. What does that reflect back to us about us? Something ultimately is wrong with us or our communities, right? And so it just bothers me so much sometimes when it's always the slant of, yeah, Black people are at the top of the charts in all these kind of negative spaces
Mm-hmm.
and areas, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we are. But listen, some of us didn't get COVID. Some of us were okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us made sure to take care of ourselves so we could take care of our families. Can we talk about that too? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
And I think
yep.
that's a great segue kind of into the next question. So Lisa, how do you what advice would you offer, or what tools, or what would you recommend for those that, number one, may find themselves overwhelmed, may find themselves a little anxious, and how do we navigate the months and years to come in such a unique historical space?
Yes, yes. What I'm talking about to people, therapy is great. If you have resources and you can afford to engage in that, please do so. But what I've been talking about to people, it doesn't matter whether you come to therapy, Chandra, because you can come here all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't cultivate some tools, right,
Mm-hmm.
and some practices, then coming to therapy, you'll be with me for 5 years talking about the same stuff and nothing will have changed.
Mm.
So, what I'm encouraging people to do is to cultivate practice, prayer, meditation, mindfulness, yoga. When I say prayer, it could be affirmative prayer,
Mm-hmm.
it could be beseeching prayer. When I work with believers, because I have quite a few of them, I talk about the scriptures, right? Listen, people want to talk about the Bible, and sometimes there's a negative slant on it, all those things. Listen, in the Bible, there's some very clear direction on things. Be anxious for nothing,
Mm-hmm.
but in all things, give
Mm-hmm.
thanks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, don't worry. I came to, you can have the kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these great promises, and I'm paraphrasing, Lord knows I'm not a biblical scholar. So somebody out there like, girl, she tear them up, tear those scriptures up. But
That's up. We know what you're talking about.
thank you. I came that you might have life and that life more abundantly. When I think about that, and if I say it regularly, guess what? I feel better. Woo! I should be abundant. I should have good things. I shouldn't be sitting here worried about what the future holds because I know who holds the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things can help you over time mitigate anxiety, mitigate depression. All the things start here. Chandra, this is where
Mm.
everything starts in the thought that
Yeah.
creates a feeling and then a behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can have people use those practices to help reframe their thinking or learn how to sit with feelings or thoughts and say, hey,
Mm.
you know what? I have thoughts. I'm not my thought. They
Mm.
don't control me. I control them. So begin to watch your thinking, right?
Mm.
What am I thinking about? And what is it causing me to do or to feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can master those things. You can cultivate peace that passeth all understanding in your life if you're intentional about it and you want to create the life that you want. I mean, it's as simple as that for me. Like we can talk about all the methodology I learned at the
Right.
University of Chicago. That's great. But it really just boils down to being committed to practices that help you to cultivate joy. Joy and peace are not these things that are out there that you're waiting for somebody to drop inside of you. They're here. You just have to cultivate the ways in which you enter those spaces, right?
Mm.
And so whether that's prayer, meditation, talking to yourself, affirming yourself, right?
Self
I
talk.
am beautiful. I
This is
am
the
powerful, right?
this is yeah. We talk to ourselves more than we talk to anybody else.
We do. We do. It's that inner chatter all the
Yeah.
time. But some people's inner chatter is not positive, right?
Hmm.
And I want to say this too. When we start thinking about how we think about ourselves, others, and the world, there's something called core beliefs, right?
Hmm.
One of the great tenets of a behavior therapy that I love called cognitive behavior therapy. And core beliefs, as Black people, we get ours from, like everybody else, from our parents, from our aunts, uncles, extended family, friends, all those things, those experiences teach us what to think about us, right? Or who we are. And most of the time, we don't think about the fact that not only are the things that our parents and other folks are giving us are part of those core beliefs, but also, again, historical, racial, and interpersonal trauma informs how we think about ourselves and what we think is possible for our lives. Got to start reframing those
Hmm.
thoughts. Your thinking, Chandra, is either heaven or hell.
Hmm.
You get to choose, right? And so for me, I like to feel good. I
Hmm.
like to be at peace. I like to experience joy on a regular. So guess what I do? I do those things every day. I'm intentional about my meditation time. I'm intentional about reading certain inspirational books so that it keeps my mind right, like on the right things. And
Hmm.
I can stay focused on creating the life that I want for myself. And that's what I want for my clients.
Mm. What's your definition of mental health?
Oh, wow. Not killing somebody today. No.
Listen, that's always
Not
a good
cussing,
day.
right. Not cussing somebody out.
Yeah.
My definition of mental health is being able to master your thinking, being able to understanding that we have the power to create whatever we want. Do you know how powerful the word is?
Hmm.
Sometimes I think about the Sears Tower in Chicago. It's not called the Sears Tower. I forget what it's called now, but it used to be the tallest world, building in the world. And I think about that all the time. That was a word first. It
Hmm.
was a thought, then became a word. And
Hmm.
then it became the tallest building in the world.
Hmm.
And so to me, that means that our words are powerful. But usually it's the thought, then the word, or the word, then the thought. Watch mental health, the foundation of it is your thought process. What are you thinking about? And what is it leading you to do?
Hmm.
That's really it.
Listen, that's so much. We could be here all day long, but I'm not going to hold you. Listen, we're going to have to do this again. Um,
Please.
I absolutely love the passion that you have for this. I absolutely love the joy that it brings you. It just radiates,
Thank you.
even through this screen. And I think it's so necessary. And we didn't even get to this subject. Just real quick, I don't want to hold you too long,
No,
but
you're fine.
when we think about specifically women of color, right?
Hmm.
Number one, I think it's so necessary to have a therapist that can relate to us, that understands our context, the
Sure.
context of the Black woman in America, right?
Hmm.
So I just hats off to the work that you do. But really quick
Thank
before
you.
we go, let's talk about over this last week, we have definitely seen number one with the Olympics,
Mm.
with the release of Bill Cosby. Let's talk about that. We don't have to go directly into it. But listen, I was
Can I? You
exhausted.
don't want me? You.
I was
This is a.
exhausted.
This is. Isn't this a Christian show?
It is.
Okay. You want me to stay right? Okay. Go ahead.
But you can tell
Chandra,
the
because
truth.
I'd be
The Bible
mad.
says the truth shall make you free.
Woo.
So
Yeah.
we can
Um.
I was exhausted by the time the week was over. Um that is a lot. Those type of the way we see some of those things play out systematically,
Mhm.
you're so right. It does affect even the way we view ourselves as a
Absolutely.
Black woman in America, in
Absolutely.
America.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that, even Black women in the workplace, just so much?
Listen. Bill Cosby. I'm going to try to maintain my dignity here and understand within the context of this being a show, a Christian show. I don't have a lot to say about that
Okay.
except that's the reason why women don't tell.
Hmm.
Just the reason why a lot of us don't say anything when we are sexually assaulted,
Hmm.
because we see this time and time again. As for him being black, I don't care what color he is. He made choices, and while we were loving on him as Bill Cosby and as Fat Albert, he was raping women. So I don't have a lot to say about that, except,
Yeah.
again, I think it reflects back to us again, something about ourselves as
Hmm.
women and our word, right?
Hmm.
And to see so many Black women, Black pastors, and celebrities support his release, what again does that say to women about their voices in situations like that? So that's all I got to say about him. um, the Olympics in Shakaria. I'm thinking that's what you were talking about.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Is it
was
Shakaria or Shakaria?
Sh-
Shakara?
Shakari.
Shikari.
Shakari.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
She
Um,
corrected one of the reporters, and we're
did
gonna
she?
get it right, but I think it's Shakari, maybe.
Shakari. Okay.
Okay.
First of all, I love her.
She's
I
awesome.
love her. I love the way she looks, the way she represents herself, and the way she is okay with who she is.
Hmm.
She's not trying to be anybody other than who she is. People, everybody, I mean, marijuana is legal in Illinois, right? So
Hmm.
you can smoke it. I'm sure the Olympics obviously are a no drug space.
Hmm.
Her mother recently died. I have
Hmm.
worked with young people who I have recommended small amounts of marijuana to help their anxiety.
Hmm.
So all I could think of was, yes, it's a rule, but we losing your mother 2 or 3 weeks ago, a month ago, hell, a year ago, losing your mom, and all of what comes with this sudden fame can cause anybody anxiety, extreme feelings of anxiousness. And so we don't know what all that young woman is dealing with, going through, feeling. And I'm sorry that that happened to her, but I'm also
Yeah.
happy that she'll get a chance to participate
Yeah.
in the Olympics. And I need for people who are out here coping with sex and drugs and shopping and all of those things
Hmm.
to give her some slack and offer her some grace and compassion,
Hmm.
please. And thank you.
Good job. Good job. Because and listen, I'm telling you, I'm working to kind of maintain my my unbiased stance in a little bit. But the reality is this, and if I can just be real and transparent for a moment, I'm telling you,
Mhm,
when I was just looking at all that, I thought about two things. Number one, when I was 21, okay, when I was 21, my grandmother who raised me, okay,
mhm,
my
mhm,
grandmother who raised me passed away a couple months before I graduated college, right?
mhm.
She passed of cancer. It was slow. It was, that's horrible what that does.
Yeah.
Watching that body break down, what it does to the family. I would often go home on the weekends as one of the caretakers to relieve my grandfather and my aunt. And
Mhm.
so I coped in some very Shakari like ways during that time. The things that I started doing just to numb that pain, just so that's number one. And then number two, as I mentioned, my grandmother raised me, right? So my
Mhm.
mother didn't raise me. Now, my mother, who I still knew, who was still in my life, but didn't raise me, she passed away 5 years ago, maybe five, maybe going on
Mhm.
six. Let me tell you, number
Mhm.
one, there's still moments where that pain, where that grief and that pain is raw. And then number
Mhm.
two, when you lose a non-custodial parent, that's a different type of pain. Let me tell you from experience, that's a different type of
Mhm.
pain because not only are you grieving, you grieve that person, you grieve that parent, but then most of the times for a child, you still have something in the back of your mind that we still have time to get it to get it right, baby.
Sure.
You still have
Yeah.
time to get. And so
Yeah.
now you've had that hope snatched away from you in a moment.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that's so layered and loaded. My friends and I were talking about it this
Mhm.
weekend because I have friends, we have similar upbringings. That's so layered and so
It
loaded.
is.
And one of the things that I just really kind of broke my heart for Shakari was she possibly didn't have a strong enough support system to where she didn't feel like that was her only coping mechanism, you know?
Sure. Sure.
Um
Yeah.
to and not to say right or wrong, but only um to endanger what she's worked so hard for in this moment, you know?
Yeah.
Because think about
Yes.
this, the Olympics don't happen overnight. They trained for that for years.
Yes,
She's
they
trained for
do.
years. She knew this
Hmm.
was coming up, and yet she
Hmm.
still made that decision to do it. So what kind of pain must she have been in?
That's what, and that's it. You know, it's not what's wrong with her, what happened to her. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? What's happening in her. And the other part of this is nobody is down for our humanity as Black women.
Absolutely.
They want pieces of it, and most times those pieces are something that's going to benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not down for us in our entirety. They're not down for that
Yeah.
at all. So
Mm-hmm.
you can only bring the pieces that please them, and them a part of systemic racism, you know
Mm-hmm.
who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You can only bring a part of yourself, the part that's going to benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
But the parts that are not tasteful or not don't fit into respectability politics,
Mm.
don't bring that. Don't
Mm.
do that. You see, and so that's a part of our problem and a part of our need to cope. You see what I'm saying? How crazy this thing is.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
the part of the stuff that is done, right? And then you got to try to deal with that and internalize it and try to find ways to cope with that. And then they turn around and demonize you. It's like the game.
Yeah.
If you're not on top of your mental and emotional health and spiritual health as a Black person,
Yeah.
you will not make it. Chandra, I walk down the streets of Chicago. I'm in spaces and I look at people sometimes, Black women, they are gone. There is nothing left.
Mm.
My mother says to me all the time, a Black woman can be dead. They will prop you up in the chair, open up your eyes, and say, "She all right," because there's nobody checking for us like that.
Listen,
Not even us.
that image of that strong Black woman. Listen, you're gonna have to come back. I'm gonna give them
I
this
love
read
to.
because
I
this
love
is
to.
because even you mentioned respectability politics,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
church and all that. That's a whole show in itself. How that has affected us. I love that exasperated side. I love that side right there.
Oh my
It's just so
God.
much, but I truly believe that we are in a unique space. Number one, right now, where we are having these conversations, where
Hmm.
we are in
Hmm.
a time where we're able to articulate strongly and use our voices what we need, and
Hmm.
to draw some lines in the sand to kind of say, this is
Hmm.
what I need in order to function, to cope, to feel, to grieve, to grow, to heal, to
Hmm.
release, because all of
Hmm.
these things
Hmm.
are so necessary in order for us to move forward. We just can't keep doing business as usual. It has
We
to go.
cannot. We cannot. And what I am, I'm happy about that too. I'm thrilled that you and other folks are using your forums in this way so that we can come together and have these conversations. I believe that the ship is turning. It's
Mm-hmm.
slow and it's
Mm-hmm.
painful. But
Mm-hmm.
everything that needs to change first has to be seen, right? So it has
Yes.
to rise to the surface. You know what? Thank God for Donald Trump, because there's some people in this country that thought that racism was over. So no, he
Mm-hmm.
showed you it is not.
Oh
It
yes.
is
Oh
alive
yes.
and well. And so
Oh
in order for
yes.
something to be acknowledged, it has to be seen. And
Yes.
then you can start the process of changing and eradicating and making anew. And so that's what I'm excited about, is that there are some shifts
Mm-hmm.
in people's consciousness right now that I think are going to, in the long run, make it better for the young women behind us and the ones who haven't even come here yet, that are
Yeah.
waiting to come. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Thank you once again. Listen, you've hung out
Of
so much
course,
longer than we planned, but
no worries.
but again, just such necessary work, and I always salute people like yourself that work in this space because it's so needed. Do me a favor, Lisa, and give everybody all your social. Let them know how they can follow you, keep up with you, anything you have that's
Sure.
coming up, because you're doing some great work.
Thank you. So you can find me on all social media outlets at Lisa Butler, LCSW, Facebook, Instagram, and you can also find me at my website at www.lisabutlerlcsw.com. Thanks again for having me, Chandra. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys. Make sure that you follow, support, and more than anything, let's take care of our own mental health because we
Please.
need it. We need it. So,
Yes, we
so thank
do.
you once again.
Thank
Appreciate you for
you.
all the work that you're doing, and be blessed.
You too. Thank you.